Hey friends, before we start this journey into the past, do me one small favor, click the subscribe button below this video. Why? Because today we're not just going to have a dry recap of facts. We're going to dive into the thick of events where ice, blood, and steel intertwined into one legendary story. The story of a weapon born in a small country but one that made giants tremble. The Finnish Suomi KP-41. And I guarantee by the end of this tale, you'll look at World War II with completely different eyes. Don't miss a single detail, and be sure to write in the comments. Are you familiar with this legend? Your opinion is priceless. Let's go. A world thirsting for automatic fire. Let's mentally travel back to the 1920s and 30s. The world was just catching its breath after the horrors of the First World War. Trenches, machine guns, gas attacks. All of it showed that the era of bayonet charges and dense infantry formations was gone forever. Military thinkers in all countries were feverishly searching for an answer to one question. How can we give the ordinary soldier in the trench more firepower? How can one fighter control space that previously required an entire squad? It was at this moment that a relatively new class of weapon entered the historical stage, the submachine gun. The idea was simple. Use cheap pistol ammunition, equip the weapon with the ability to fire automatically, and get a sort of pocket machine gun for close combat. Germany was experimenting with the MP-18, America with the Thompson, and in Soviet Russia, ideas for the future PPD and PPSh were already taking shape. But there was one country, small, harsh, having only recently gained independence. A country whose army was small, whose resources were limited, and whose potential adversary was vast and powerful. Finland. And it was here, among lakes and coniferous forests, that one of the most iconic, most well-thought-out, and most expensive designs in the history of automatic weapons was to be born. A weapon the Finns proudly named after their homeland, Suomi. Part 1, Birth of a Legend. Aimo Lahti and his obsession. Imagine Finland in the early 1920s. A young republic, having fought for its independence from Russia, lives in a state of constant anxiety. On the other side of the border, the Soviet Union, a giant with unclear but clearly unfriendly intentions. The Finnish army is small. It needed a force multiplier. It needed a weapon that would allow a small detachment to defend against superior forces. And here he appears, Aimo Lahti, a man without formal engineering education, but with incredible talent, intuition, and, importantly, stubbornness. He began his experiments as early as 1921. 10 years of trials, errors, and refinements. 10 years of searching for the perfect balance between reliability, accuracy, manufacturability, and combat effectiveness. What drove Lahti? Not just patriotism. There was an understanding of a simple truth. The Finnish soldier would have to fight in extreme conditions. Frosts down to -40, waist-deep snow, humidity, dirt. The weapon must work when the metal is covered in frost and the lubricant freezes. It must be accurate because ammunition on the outskirts of Europe is worth its weight in gold. And it must be simple to operate for a conscript soldier who was plowing the land just 6 months ago. And so, at the turn of 1930 and 1931, a prototype is presented to the world. Not just another SMG. This was an engineering symphony. The Finns, known for their love of quality and functionality, just think of their knives, watches, or saunas, approached weapon creation with the same meticulousness. The Suomi KP-31, where KP is konepistoli, meaning machine pistol, from the first glance amazed with its solidity. This was not a weapon cobbled together from plumbing pipes, like some later wartime models. This was a tool made with soul. Part 2, Anatomy of Genius. What's inside the Suomi? Let's take this weapon apart to understand why it stood out so much. Externally, a long perforated barrel shroud, a massive wooden stock, solid shapes. But all the magic is inside. The heart of the system, the vacuum brake. Here is Lahti's first brilliant find. In most submachine guns of that time, the bolt is just a massive piece of metal that flies back and forth. When fired, it recoils, compressing the spring. Then under its action chambers a new round. Simple, but there's a problem. At such a frantic rate, 700 to 900 rounds per minute, the bolt slams into the extreme points with monstrous force. The weapon jerks, the barrel moves off the sight line, and accuracy, especially in single shots, leaves much to be desired. Lottie said, "Stop." He invented the vacuum braking system. Imagine, the Suomi's receiver and the bolt itself are made with minimal clearances, almost like a piston in a cylinder. There is a small valve on the rear receiver cap. When the bolt recoils, it compresses the air behind it. This air escapes through the valve to the outside, and the valve snaps shut. And during the forward movement, a partial vacuum is created behind the bolt, which gently but insistently slows it down. The result? The bolt doesn't slam. It comes to a smooth stop. The weapon became incredibly stable. A Finnish soldier could conduct aimed single fire at distances up to 200 meters. For an SMG of those years, this was phenomenal. Quality bordering on excess. The Suomi's receiver was not stamped from sheet metal like many competitors. It was forged from a solid blank and then long and carefully machined. The barrel, 314 millimeters long, very long for an SMG, provided high muzzle velocity and, consequently, a flat trajectory and lethal power. A latch for quick barrel change right in combat. A solution ahead of its time. Yes, in the end it was rarely used, but the very idea showed that the designer was thinking about real combat scenarios, not just parades. Ergonomics for survival. Notice the bolt handle. It's located at the bottom, right at the cut of the receiver. Why? Lottie reasoned logically. If the handle were on the side, like on the German MP40, snow, dirt, and water would get into its slot. But from below, it's protected. And when firing, this handle is stationary, not in the way and not distracting. The trigger mechanism allowed for both single-shot and automatic fire. The safety selector on the front of the trigger guard under the finger. Everything is thought out to the smallest detail. But there was a downside. All this splendor weighed 4.6 kilograms. Empty. Now imagine loading a 71-round drum magazine of 9 by 19 millimeter parabellum into it. The total weight exceeds 6.5 kilograms. That's the weight of 2 or 3 modern assault rifles. The Suomi was heavy, complex to manufacture, and devilishly expensive. But the Finns made these sacrifices. They were buying quality and reliability. Part 3, War. The Suomi meets the Red Army. And then comes the harsh test. November 1939. Stalin, confident in a lightning victory, throws the troops of the Leningrad military district at Finland. The Winter War begins. The Soviet command expected the Finnish army to scatter at the first salvos of the Katyushas. But they encountered something unexpected. Cuckoos, ski saboteurs clad in white camouflage suits, armed with these very Suomis. In the forests of Karelia, among snowdrifts and frozen swamps, hell began for the Red Army soldiers. Finnish detachments, often numbering just a few dozen men, inflicted monstrous losses on entire companies and battalions. The tactic was simple. Sudden, devastating, accurate automatic fire at close range. The Suomi's long barrel and its stability allowed the Finns to accurately fire single shots, saving ammunition. And when they needed to stop an attack, they switched to automatic mode. 750 rounds per minute, it sounded like tearing canvas. For the Red Army soldiers, accustomed to the crack of Mosin rifles and the rare bursts of the DP-27, this was the sound of death. The Suomi was especially effective in the fortified areas of the Mannerheim Line. Narrow embrasures of bunkers, cramped trenches, here compact automatic weapons were king. Soviet soldiers for the first time en masse encountered what would later be called fire superiority at close range. The outcome of the war was difficult for Finland, but the moral victory remained with it. A small country showed its teeth, and one of the main symbols of this resistance became the Suomi submachine gun. It became a hero of newspaper articles around the world. Western observers threw up their hands. How is it that the backward Finns have such a technical marvel, while the great powers have only prototypes? Part 4. Influence on history. From Helsinki to Tula. Here's what's interesting. The Suomi directly influenced the course of weapons development in the USSR. After the Winter War, Soviet military and designers conducted a thorough analysis of captured Finnish weapons. They were impressed by two things: its extreme reliability in frost and those very 71-round drum magazines. Yes, the Suomi was equipped with various magazines, box magazines for 20 and 50 rounds and disc magazines. But the large drum became its signature. Soviet weapons designers Georgy Shpagin and Alexei Sudyev adopted this idea. The legendary PPSh-41 initially went into production precisely with a 71-round drum magazine copied from the Suomi, with slight modifications. Look at the most famous photos of Stalingrad or the assault on Berlin. In the hands of Soviet soldiers, you most often see a PPSh with just such a drum. True, it later turned out that beauty has a price. The drums were heavy, noisy, they rattle when running, difficult to load, and not always reliable. By the end of the war, common sense prevailed, and the PPSh massively switched to simple 35-round box magazines. But the very fact of borrowing is the best praise for the Finnish design. Part 5: Twilight and Legacy. The Fate of the King. The Suomi served through the entire Second World War on Finland's side. In the Continuation War, 1941 to 44, it served reliably until the 50s and remained in storage until the 80s. About 80,000 units were produced in total. For such a niche country, that's a huge number. But time takes its toll. The concept of the Suomi, an expensive, heavy, machine gun-like SMG, became obsolete. The world was confidently moving towards unified assault rifles using intermediate cartridges, like the AK-47. The Suomi remained in history as a benchmark of quality, as an example of what engineering thought is capable of when it is not constrained by total economy and the rush of wartime. Today, the Suomi is a collector's dream. In Russia, for example, you can find so-called deactivated models, converted to non-firing. Their price can reach 300,000 rubles or more. It is a weapon legend, a weapon symbol. The lessons of the Suomi, not by mass but by skill. So what does the story of the Suomi KP/31 tell us? This is a story about how in military affairs, quality can sometimes be more important than quantity. That one well-thought-out, reliable system in the hands of a trained and motivated soldier can be more terrifying than a dozen cheap ones. This is a story of national character etched in steel. Finnish stubbornness, endurance, the ability to use terrain and climate, the pursuit of functional perfection. The Suomi was not perfect. It was expensive. It was heavy. But for those hands and for those tasks for which it was created, it was perhaps the best. It became one of those building blocks that formed the myth of the invincible Finnish army that stopped the Soviet colossus. It reminded the world that in war, victory comes not only from brute force, but also from intellect embodied in metal. And so our saga of the Northern Legend comes to an end. But our communication doesn't end here. If this deep dive hooked you, if you want to continue immersing yourself in such detailed stories about weapons, tactics, and turning points in history, your direct path is to click the red subscribe button and the bell next to it. It's important for me to know your opinion. Write in the comments, what weapon of World War II, in your opinion, was the most technological or the most unexpected? Maybe you have your own stories related to the Suomi? Let's discuss. Your activity is the fuel for new research and new videos. Thank you for being with us until the end. See you next time in the depths of history.